Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Hi, we're doing a second half of our broadcast on Kyle Rittenhouse and the verdict of not guilty of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of, um, I think it was assault, felonious assault. Was the judge biased? Well, we've been looking at some things about what happened during the trial that seem to show that the judge, who is 75 years old, his name is Bruce Schroeder, may have been more on the side of the defendant. And I'm going to read you a little something that I got from moveon.org that says Rittenhouse's trial has made a complete mockery of our justice system. The judge presiding over the case hasn't even pretended to be impartial over the last couple of weeks. He lashed out and screamed at the prosecution during the middle of questioning. He's made racist, anti Asian comments. He barred the prosecution from referring to the two people killed as victims on the grounds that it is too loaded a word, but allowed the defense to refer to them as rioters. He even asked the jury to give a round of applause for a Rittenhouse defense witness. It's no surprise that Rittenhouse is able to walk free despite having ruthlessly taken the lives of two people. There were several things that happened during that trial that people made excuses for the judge. There were several pictures of him allowing the defendant to stand behind him as he was looking at a screen, which people say is a way of signaling to the jury that he had nothing to fear. And anyone who has even either sat on a jury or been in court for any reason knows that there is so much protocol when approaching a judge. You have to ask permission to even approach the bench, and that is for attorneys. So, why was this judge allowing the man who was on trial for brutally killing two people to stand behind him? So now we're going to talk about, is even though the jury is the one who decides the cases, can they do a little bit of signaling on how they want it to go? Yes, I think they can. For one thing, they can give instructions to the jury, which they do. And when you are sitting in a jury, you are allowed only so much um, evidence. I've sat on a jury before, and there were things that we were not even privy to. I was on a jury where a person was on trial for drug possession. He was such a dangerous person. He was in leg irons. We never knew that. They disguised it on the front of the table where he was sat, and when he was on the witness box, they had him in the witness box before we came in, and we had to leave before he left. We never knew that he was in leg irons, because that may have changed the the way we would have, because we ended up convicting him of the lesser charge because there wasn't enough evidence for the other one. Had we seen this dangerous man in leg irons, maybe we would have changed our minds. Right. And that is how a judge can bias a jury. They can, and it may not necessarily, and it's not a bad bias all the time, because he came back and he talked to us later and he says the verdict was correct. That, given the evidence that you had, this is what you had to, these are the parameters that you had. We thought he was guilty of the other, of the major charge. We did not know for sure. There was no evidence for that. So in this case, we saw the judge continually berate the prosecution, hamstring their case, not allow a lot of things that happened during that. So yes, I think this is the verdict that the judge wanted.
Mm.
And this is the kind of signaling that happens when the justice is somebody other than just us.
Mm.
Now, you all are not old enough to remember this, but I, as a child, remember this because I think I was in high school after the 1968 Democratic Convention, and they had the trial of the Chicago Eight.
Oh,
Now,
I remember.
yeah, out of the Chicago Eight, one of them was black. That was Bobby Seale. And the kind of stuff that went on in that classroom, in that courtroom was just reprehensible. You know, the judge was berating Bobby Seale, had him bound and gagged, and then they removed him. So a lot of people think, oh, it was just the Chicago Seven, but it was originally the Chicago Eight because the judge wanted to influence the black juror who was on the jury. And they wanted them to vote a certain way, but they knew that she would not go that way if one of the people on trial were black. And so they removed Bobby Seale totally. And
Who actually wasn't a part of that group anyway.
yeah,
He hadn't
and
even met them.
yeah, and I think that that kind of behavior in a classroom, I remember Mama and Daddy talking about it, how that was just not cool, for another word. I can't enough
Well, we
vocabulary
have some.
describe how that happened. And people have been doing things like that, misbehaving, being in a position of authority and using that authority to do whatever they want and not adhere to the law.
Well, that's one of the things that we're seeing such a wide range of opinion. Now we have somebody who is disagreeing, Bonhoeffer's daughter, and Bonhoeffer's daughter is saying, "Did you bother to listen to the evidence?" Well, that's the issue. Evidence that was not allowed to be permitted on the one hand, and evidence that had nothing to do with a person killing somebody on another. It doesn't matter what the background of the people was that were killed. That
Yes.
is not the case. So that evidence had nothing to do with the crime committed, which was murder.
And the thing is that the victims, and they were victims, were not on trial.
Right,
The
the
only
victim is not
killing
on
that
trial
happened
for being
in,
killed.
yeah, shame on you, because the only killing that happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was by a 17-year-old boy with an illegal AR-15 who crossed state lines to do it. No one else was killed that night except for the killing of him. If he had stayed his butt at home, maybe done some homework, no one would be dead from
That's
that night.
if he had had his behind at home, then perhaps no one would be dead. So, I mean, it really comes down to, are we understanding that when someone's on trial for killing someone, the person that they killed is not on trial? That's the problem. And I'm wondering if jurors understand that, because, like we said before, it's the same tactic that they use all the time when they want to discount someone's validity, as if they didn't deserve to live anyway. So what if they got killed? You look at all these various cases where people have gotten murdered, and it's always an attack on their character, as if somehow they didn't deserve to live. And the person killing them was not protecting someone from their behavior. The person killing them was just killing them. So now we've got another comment. So Craig Bulgarian says, I think Kyle Rittenhouse should have
Crazy.
gotten life in prison, at least. I think. But when they choose jurors, and both lawyers have to agree on the jurors, and it's difficult because you want to get a juror that's sympathetic to your client or your position, but these jurors, obviously, they showed that they could be persuaded that this was a self-defense case and not, you know, a
Well,
white supremacist case.
if you disallow the evidence that showed that, that
Right.
he crossed, that he wasn't supposed to have, the gun charge was even dismissed by the
Right.
judge.
So
And
they
that
didn't
was the
even
one
have enough
thing,
evidence to make that kind of a
and
decision.
he was 17. He was a minor. He did not
Yes.
have a right to legally possess that
Right.
gun in any state,
That's
any
correct.
way, shape, or form. And yet that gun charge was dismissed, making it easier. And when, as somebody who sat on a jury, I don't know if you guys have before, but I've
I've
sat,
been on a jury a number of times. And let me
yes,
tell you, when they are questioning people, they eliminate people. It's supposed to be keeping you from being biased. But I remember the last case where I sat in, and this was like before the pandemic, I was called in, and then it was a murder case where a woman had murdered someone else's husband that she was having an affair with. So one of the first, and they went through like 120 people. So the first question they ask everybody is, have you ever had a bad interaction with a police officer? Well, that was like 3/4 of the audience. And so they're all dismissed just because of that. And then is anyone ever, the kind of questions that they ask to eliminate someone is like when you're done, you're trying to get someone who lives in the mountains, doesn't have a TV, doesn't read a newspaper, and doesn't know that bread can now come in slices. So you have that they're trying to. I understand the reason for trying to have someone be unbiased, but sometimes I think that it is not fair how they try to pick someone that is going to be favorable to their side, and everybody has that right, but you don't have the benefit of the doubt. Has anyone ever been in jail? Oh, okay, so then that's like another half. Has anyone ever gotten high? Okay, so now you're like getting everybody. You're supposed to be
Right.
trying to get a jury of the person's peers.
Right.
well, that none of, well, that's part of the trial science. I watch Bull, where they show, what you're supposed to, be looking for in a jury. But the problem also is that once you get a jury that is more or less favorable to both sides, they still have very narrow parameters on what they can rule on. So if you don't allow the prior bad acts of someone, if you don't allow uh, the gun charge that showed that it was an illegal possession, I mean, the parameters become so very narrow that, yes, I believe that had it come back, even if it come back as a guilty plea, the judge can legally set aside that verdict, and it has been done.
Oh,
Yes,
absolutely.
it
Yes.
has been
So
done.
a
So,
judge's attitude can definitely make the difference in a trial. Now we've got a couple of more comments, and well, Galaxy Wave, who's that? Fiji, whatever. Their, I guess their claim is the person who says that that Kyle Rittenhouse should have gotten life in prison. He's saying that person isn't white, but how do you know? And then, of course, I'm not going to dignify it, but they just
thank
wrote
you.
out they need prayer.
Yes.
So we gonna pray for you, Galaxy, because your heart needs some healing. But we're gonna go on to the next one. Look at the videos, recognize his life could have been snuffed out that night. Not if he'd have been at home doing homework.
Where he should have been.
If he'd been home doing
Yes.
his homework like a
You
17-year-old student should have been. Okay, Usman Ali says, I'm sorry to say this. I respectfully disagree with the lady in the blue. Kyle was legally allowed to own that gun. It's a Wisconsin law for him to allow five.
He is not a Wisconsin citizen. This child is from Illinois.
Yes,
from
that's
Illinois. He's not allowed.
Have a
Yes.
gun.
not a Wisconsin
So,
citizen. He's a resident of Illinois.
He's a resident
So
of
it doesn't
Illinois.
matter
He's
what
not allowed.
Wisconsin law is.
You know what? I live in Massachusetts. I can't own a gun in some other state if I'm not, if I'm not a resident of that
resident
state.
of that state.
That, and say, and there was someone else who said something about his life could have been snuffed out that night. The thing is that if you start a fight and you get your butt beat, you can now suddenly decide that it was self-defense.
When
If
you
you
started
started
the
the
fight.
fight.
Right, yes.
That is the same thing that happened down here in Florida
With George Zimmerman. Yes.
yes, that
He
was the whole
started it.
Right.
He went after
Talking
someone.
a
and
child.
the kid is fighting back, and so
Right.
now he's shooting him and saying, "Oh, it was self-defense."
Right. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So now Usman Ali says the judge deemed that particular charge not admissible because it's Wisconsin law, but that's the problem. He was not a Wisconsin resident.
He
So
was
the law
not a
doesn't apply to
Wisconsin
him.
resident.
He had to go by Illinois law. And in Illinois, a 17-year-old is not allowed to have a gun.
That's
so that is that.
We're all from Illinois. We would know.
We know. So now open debate has a question as a Black conservative. I want to ask you what these people are doing when they got allegedly murdered by Kyle. Well, they
were protesting
within their legal right to protest what they thought was an act of injustice. It wasn't any of his business because he doesn't live there. Period.
And it doesn't matter what they were doing. You know, it doesn't matter what they were doing because he came and he shot someone.
Right.
You know, and
he wasn't a law enforcement officer.
And he was not a law enforcement officer. He was not enforcing anything. He went there to act like it was a video game and he was going to kill some people. He went there to kill someone. You don't take a gun, an AR-15 or a semi-automatic rifle, and I don't know anything about weapons, so excuse me if I get that wrong, but you do not take a weapon somewhere and not plan on using it.
And you don't bring a weapon to a protest.
And if you don't like what we're saying, John Horseman, why don't you leave?
Yeah, you can leave. You know what? That. We don't have to leave. We're
here to make it better.
Yeah, you know what? We're
and when it gets better, you'll probably have to leave because you won't like
leave.
it.
He did not say that. How old is he?
How do you feel about a globalist slave trader like Soros funding Black Lives Matter and Antifa?
Antifa is an ideology. It is not an
organization.
It is not an organization.
People are going to use this president of self-defense. People they don't like. Well, you know, that's one of the things when you provoke a fight
and then you get beat. You can shoot them and say, "I was standing my ground."
Right.
That's
Black. Because you know what? Trayvon could have been standing his ground because somebody was following him and attacked him. Yeah. But nobody saw that.
See, this is the whole issue. He shouldn't have been there. Period. Case closed. You can't go and provoke a fight. You can't go break in somebody's house and point a gun at them. And then when they defend themselves, you claim self-defense. Everybody knows that, right? How many times people say, well, I had to shoot an intruder. So whatever happened to him, he was an intruder. He was not a resident. He was not called there. He was not hired security. He was an intruder. So whatever they did, whether they chased him through some animal, whatever, he was an intruder. And that's how you treat an intruder. So he shouldn't have been there, period.
Yeah, they were standing their ground.
They were standing their ground. That's right. And it was their ground.
They were legally, they were allowed to be there.
Right. They were allowed to be there. He had no business there. And, you know, I think, but the interesting thing about this case is that it brings to the surface this kind of thought. And it brings to the surface the hatred and resentment and sense of entitlement that so many people still carry. And it apparently presses some buttons because we've had people who wanted to throw little nasty remarks. We've had insults. Look at all of this behavior. This is the mindset. And all you're doing is proving our case.
Exactly.
Because this is the mindset that a Kyle Rittenhouse grew up with, apparently. The reason why he believed he could intrude someone else's neighborhood, intrude someone else's state, and point guns at people who are engaging in their right to peaceful protest. And those who think that there's something right about that, this brings all of that twisted thinking to the surface so that we can see those who have issues, those who have their own personal issues, whether it's racial hatred or self-hatred or whatever it is. Because usually if you hate somebody else, you hate yourself. It comes to the surface. And it's interesting that people are motivated to speak in this instant because the white supremacist philosophy is being challenged. What's inside of you? Everybody who's up in arms, figuratively, what's inside of you that's upsetting you that we're saying what we're saying?
And you know what? I always say, if you don't like it, turn it off. No one's forcing you to, this isn't a okay, you're right, he had the right to do this. No, he
He
didn't.
was wrong. He was
He was
wrong.
wrong.
He was wrong.
He was
Period.
wrong.
He was wrong. He was wrong. And the issue is, are there enough people who recognize the wrong to not let that judge get back in office? I mean, when
this person, listen, I wanted to just see this. I said that he didn't see any bias from the judge based upon race. Well, all the people involved in here were white. So we're not talking racial bias, but he also had racially charged things that he said during the case. Whether
based on a racial issue.
Yeah, this wasn't necessarily a racial issue at the time, but the fact that they wanted to treat the people who were murdered as if they deserve to be murdered is very much the way they treat us.
So now John Horseman,
what?
One of those people.
Yes, apparently he's so worried about me being oppressed or us being oppressed. Am I afraid of being by a policeman? No. Are you afraid?
No.
Apparently you're afraid of something because we don't want to leave. This is our home.
Yeah.
We're 10th generation Americans. How long have your people been here?
Right.
So maybe you need to leave.
Right. Because we ain't going nowhere. Matter of fact,
we're not going anywhere.
We being fruitful and multiplying. So if you got issues there, you're just gonna be hurt because
we don't care.
We're the majority, in case you didn't know that.
And yes, we are the global majority.
We're the global majority. So if that upsets you, oh well, you'll just be living in fear.
Like this will show us that there is a serious problem in our justice system. And I know that we're not living, under some kind of rule where you can be thrown into prison for having an opinion. But I think it is important for us to realize that I had a friend who used to say, well, we came over in different boats, but we're all in the same boat now. And we need to come out of this them and us kind of attitude where you make a little remark like that and then another person has to counter it. Then it turns into like two kids fighting instead of dealing with the real issue. The reason why there is such polarization over the outcome of this verdict is because we have seen it so many times. And you feel like, this is supposed to be the land of liberty where everyone has a right to be covered in whatever their case is, the right to a jury trial, the right to be tried by people of your peers.
The right to protest, the right to peacefully protest.
And the right to peaceful, my goodness, I'm old enough to remember I was a child when they were doing the marches and black and brown and white people who were marching together for civil rights were getting beat up. It kind of illuminated the rest of the nation that this kind of stuff goes on. The brutality of people that are in law enforcement, the hatred of people. And a lot of times these people are just ordinary people who have a bad heart. You don't have to be part of some organized hate group in order to do the kind of things that have put us in the kind of place where we're at now.
Yes. All you have to be is either complicit or or actively,
Defensive.
yeah, defensive. Someone had asked about my racially charged thing. The judge the judge made several anti-Asian comments during the trial, and though all of those are part of the public record, and that's what I was talking about when I talked about, you know, the racial charges. And so, but this was this a race case? No, this was. And someone says, what do you think Kyle should have done when he was thrown a brick in a bag in the beginning and trying to grab his gun? He should not have been there.
Right. If
He
I'm
had
breaking
no
your
reason to
house, it
show
doesn't
up
matter
at a
what you throw at
protest
me. I
with a
shouldn't have been
gun.
there. You
That
know.
would have been a good time to turn around and leave.
Right.
Yeah, he could have left.
He
He could have left.
Take the
Someone
hit,
grabbed his
leave.
gun, tried to grab his gun because he shot someone in the head.
Right.
Now, like we said, he came spoiling for a fight.
Right. So when you go picking a fight and you get beat up, and so then you get a gun and shoot someone and say self-defense, but you picked a fight. Now that's what the prosecution was saying. You can't claim self-defense when you go and provoke a fight. And that's the main issue. He left his home and went over state lines and looked for someone to shoot, and he shot 2 people to death. So is this racial? Well, the riots, the protests, the people were expressing their displeasure over an issue that was seen as a race-based shooting from a police officer and in Kenosha. So those who were supporting the protests were there, and it was a multiracial support of the protests. So now we have to leave, but I want to invite you all to listen to the Female Solution Global Radio TV show tonight, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern. And our host Viata, she's going to talk about, is this a racial issue? And do we need to stop making things race? Because maybe it isn't. Well, I want all you all who got opinions to call in and comment. The number's 515-605-9325. She'll be live on the Female Solution Facebook page and YouTube channel. And also,
don't forget us next week.
We want you to join us again next week and subscribe to our YouTube channel, 3 Black Moms, and you'll get notices of every live show. And follow us on Facebook, 3 Black Moms. We appreciate your comments, even those with which we disagree. And we certainly do appreciate you thinking about this, because this is what's necessary. We really need to reflect where we are as a nation, and we need to have a higher standard of human behavior, because that's the only way we're going to get better. And when we decide that all lives matter and no one has a right to take anyone's life, then cases like this will be clear cut. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And there it is. But we thank you all. We do have to go. I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. We are 3 Black Moms.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black Moms.